Welcome to meeting number 16 of the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Pursuant to Standing Order 1064, the committee is meeting to consider the request by members of the committee to continue discussion on Truckers, Inc. I'd like to make a few comments before the benefit of members. First, please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those of you participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please raise the raise hand function. I don't think there's anybody joining us online today. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. Begin debate today, Mr. Kellaway, followed by Mr. Lawrence,
I was first. Point of order, I was first.
No, you weren't. I saw
Challenge
Mr.
the
Kellaway's
chair.
hand go up
Challenge the
while
chair.
I was...
Thank you.
I challenge the chair.
That I saw Mr.
Yes.
Kellaway's hand go while I was speaking?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I was up first.
I recognize Mr.
That's fine, I
Kellaway. If
challenge
you'd
the
like
chair.
to challenge the
I
chair, you
have.
can.
I just did.
Okay.
Shall the decision of the chair be sustained? Mr. Greaves?
Yes.
Mr. Kellaway?
Yes.
Monsieur Lauzon?
Oui.
Miss Wien?
Yes.
Mr. Albus? Mr. Lawrence?
Hey.
Mr. Lewis? No. Mr. Muse? Monsieur Barcelou-Duval?
No. That's incredible, guys.
Put
That is
four
absolutely
nays
incredible.
contre.
That's incredible. The hand was up before you guys. That's
go to
incredible.
I'll go to Mr.
That's
Lawrence,
incredible.
followed by Mr. Kellaway.
There you
You know
go.
what? It's actually quite shocking to me. We're having this childish behavior. Mr. Chair, could you please retain order in here? After canceling 2 meetings because they don't want to hear from victims, now they're going to act as if they're victims? This is ridiculous. and
Mr.
silly.
Chair, point of order.
This is not a
This
valid
is
point of order.
absolutely ridiculous.
This is not a
We
valid
want a
point of
study
order.
to go
Mr.
ahead
Chair,
for
do your job.
recommendations.
Colleagues,
This is
do your job.
this is
Colleagues,
absolutely
order. Colleagues,
incredible.
We're all going to have an opportunity to speak.
Terrible.
Mr. Lawrence Mr. Lawrence can begin discussion. The
Thank
floor is
you.
yours, sir, followed by Mr. Kellaway. And do we have any others that would like to be on the list? Mr. Barcelou-Duval is third. Mr. Lawrence, the floor is
Thank you.
yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And like I said, it's really quite remarkable that after not wanting to hear from victims of serious accidents, sometimes fatalities, they're over there playing the victim because they didn't get the right to go first. It is really beyond the pale. And his moral sanctitude is only matched by his silliness on this issue. When I want to get a couple things on the record. One, Conservatives did not consent to the cancellation of the meetings which were otherwise scheduled. This is extremely disappointing and not a way a parliament should be conducted. I want to put on the record as well that Conservatives will not consent, and we do not give our consent to any type of adjourning of the meeting prior to the full usage of all resources available. Conservatives are absolutely committed to hearing victims of who have suffered fatalities in their family, significant injuries. Conservatives care, unlike the Prime Minister, who clearly does not, as well as those members who don't want to hear, and that's the only conclusion you get, who do not want to hear from the victims of serious accidents. So with that, I will pass on the floor to Mr. Xavier Barcelou.
I have Mr. Kellaway, and then I have Mr. Barcelou-Duval. If I'm just going to be clear, they did have their 2 hands up first. Mr. Kellaway.
Thank you for respecting my hand going up. So I don't use 50-cent words to describe people or to tear people down. The member opposite, talking about silliness and a variety of other words, is absolutely categorically false. In fact, the motion on the table would have the survivors here. And what we're seeing right now is an example of the Conservative Party of Canada that used to be conservative, but now is cynical, that now is conspiratorial, that now is blending things together to suit their narrative. How dare the member opposite say that we don't care about survivors? That doesn't wash with Canadians. That doesn't wash from people from coast to coast. We have a plan on the table that we think is a pretty good motion. But we played a game today. My hand was clearly up, and we played a game. That is the seriousness that you have put into this. Now, we have a motion on the table. You could have respected that. You could have talked it out. You could have actually had a very good conversation on it. But I think right this moment today, on this side of the table, we have a lot to say. And I think that hopefully, as we listen to you folks, and you care about survivors, to come out and say that is just greasy. It is just Bush League. It is just out of the handbook that you guys have to say in your PowerPoint presentations on committee work, own the Liberals. Well, that doesn't help anybody. What a shameful act today. What a shameful act.
Thank you, Mr. Kellaway. Prochainement, j'ai Mr. Barcelou-Duval.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Now I have Mr. Barcelou-Duval. First of all, I would like to mention that I'm pleased to see you. Maybe not that pleased, but pleased to the effect that the committee is meeting this week. We didn't meet since, if I'm not mistaken, this past November 6th. So today it's November 25th. It's been quite some time. I think everyone, a lot of people at the table, were disappointed that the committee did not meet last week. That is why we were forced to bring forward the resolution we have here with 1064. I would like perhaps to know, above all, if the chair has any explanations to provide as to the reason why the meeting was not called last week. Is that a question for myself? First of all, last week, or 2 weeks ago, there was a week off. We were not here in Ottawa. On Tuesday, we had a confidence vote, and there was a rumor that there might be some games played with a confidence vote. So I didn't want the members to miss a vote, which they wanted to do in the House of Commons. So I didn't call a meeting on Tuesday. Thursday, I waited and discussed with a number of members that there might be a solution to settle the filibuster or the discussion underway, or that if we could see if there's no solution. So I said, I'll let the people speak to each other behind the scenes, not waste House of Commons money. Unfortunately, it did not work out. I wanted to call a meeting for today. I received the 1064, so we're here. The vision is to move forward, to let people discuss things as planned, hoping that we will not waste too much taxpayer money, and finally that we'll come up with a solution to hear the witnesses that I think we all want to invite here to find a solution to enable us to do it. That's what it is. Thank you, Chair. In those circumstances, in fact, I would like to bring forward a motion precisely that reads as follows: that the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities resume its work that was interrupted on November 6, 2025. All right, Mr. Lauzon.
We have a motion on deck. You should find that in order, and then I think you would take a speakers list from that point.
Okay, well, I have a speaker's list, and the next person on the speaker's list was, I find it in order, and the first person on the speaker's list is Mr. Lauzon.
All right. Want to play that?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's a bit shameful this afternoon, what we're living through. This afternoon, I can tell you that a situation that has just occurred where my colleague raised his hand first, and they already wanted to play a game with a coalition between the Conservatives and the Bloc, is very surprising to me on the part of Mr. Barcelou-Duval to enter into that game, to tell a lie to the committee, to the effect that the Conservatives had raised their hand before the Liberals.
Mr. Lauzon, j'ai un point d'ordre, Mr. Albert.
Just a moment, Mr. Lauzon, I have a point of order.
Immediately happens, goes to a vote, and to have someone else be speaking to it, I don't think you're in order. Could you please rule again and consult first with the clerk? Because it was a dilatory to resume debate on a motion, it should immediately go to a vote. We should not be having other speakers.
We had a motion that was on the table.
No, he made a
resume
motion
a
to
date.
resume the debate. That's a dilatory motion, and therefore it should be voted upon right away without debate. So if you can check with the chair or with the clerk, please, I think this would save a lot of time and energy, and I'm sure Mr. Lazone has a lot of breath that he could save for the actual debate, not the lead up to the debate.
So my understanding is Mr. Barcelou Duval introduced a motion, or reintroduced his motion.
No,
To discuss it.
He actually said, I'd like to resume our debate that we were having on, and he gave this specific date. That means it's a motion, and it should have been brought immediately to a vote. I'm just raising that at the earliest possible opportunity as a point of order. I'd ask you to consult with the clerk.
Let's go to a vote. Recorded vote, please, yes.
On the motion to resume debate from November 6th, Mr. Greaves,
Yes.
Mr. Kellaway,
Yes.
Mr. Lauzon, Ms. Whelan,
Yes.
Mr. Albus,
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Muse,
Yes.
Mr. Barcelou Duval.
Oui.
Mr. Chair.
We haven't had the results of the vote yet, guys. I have your hands up. I see what's going on.
That is 9 yeas.
Okay. Motion carries. I'm going to go Lauzon, Albus, Kellaway, Barcelou Duval.
OK. Bon, on va commencer par ce qui...
All right, well, we'll begin with what happened today. Actually, the fact that that they talked about the survivors in that way, it was offensive. We all agree that we must act quickly in the Drivers Inc. Issue. We care about the families. We have a lot of empathy toward the survivors and their families. But it's very shameful to have read this week that there were articles also and attempts to provide non-existent news to the effect that the Bloc Québécois and Mr. Barcelou Duval was using it on the website of the Bloc Québécois as to the fact that using as an excuse the survivors in order to force the production of information, whether it's tax related or other information that they know is really, they're making use of the survivors in order for political purposes alone and not for purposes of the study. Up until now, we were not aware that the witnesses were being used right from the beginning. Nothing would have prevented the Conservatives or the Bloc Québécois from using the families concerned to bring them in to testify. We never prevented them from having on the list survivors of an accident to come and testify. It's dishonest to say things that don't exist when I clearly stated during my speech the last time that there will be options for survivors, and options are not to bring them out in public in front of people to play the emotional card. One can easily bring them in camera. I even recommended to bring them in off to the side to meet with them in camera. And they never said that we never said that we didn't want to see the survivors. What I said is, and I repeat it, that I don't find it relevant. They're on the list. I would respect that, but I proposed alternative to that. And the alternatives I proposed, well, were not listened to. Why? Why use suffering, bereavement, and traumatic experiences to gain political capital when you open up the Bloc Québécois page for the benefit of those listening to us, and also to put it in the records of this committee? When you open the page of the Bloc Québécois, in the last paragraph, it mentions that the Liberals have no awareness about support to families, and 4 inches later below they ask for financing. If that's not political capital, then I wonder what is. the choice of putting on a website financing below the families that are bereaved by an accident. If that is not political capital, I know that it's in the habits of the Conservatives to have a coalition with the Bloc Québécois. They're used to playing around with sentences that are out of sync and slogans. But to see my colleague entering into that battle and offering financing on their website, I'm not sure that their leader and whip approved everything of what they're doing today. I'm not any more happy about it that the steps that were taken when here on this side, we also care about solving the problem. We could solve it quickly. We could solve it quickly, and how so? By coming back to his original motion and say yes to that. To say yes, we want to end up with, and I talked enough about that, to come out with serious recommendations. Let's leave political capital aside. Political capital on the backs of people who lost their lives, I find it disgraceful. I would never intervene in Quebec by using Highway 50 to come home, which is the highway of death. When they talk about issues, we talk about upgrading, bringing it up to standard. But I would never talk about a family who. It requires a certain minimum common sense, a certain minimum amount of empathy towards citizens. And never, never will I accept being accused of having my name used on the social media or in bulletins or in false news, fake news, saying that we don't have the heart in the right place to help people who lost family members. Our motion, Chair, is to offer survivors an opportunity to come and testify with dignity. What I requested is that it be done in private. Okay? We tried to find solutions on waiting from the other side. We could do it in camera so that we can have a bit of dignity as a committee to bring in survivors of such an accident. Chair, that was my introduction. Because in the original motion, because we came back to the original motion, I think that Mr. Aldas will remind me if I don't come directly to the original motion so that we can go to the debate where we left it off.
I will take the time that I need.
No, just come back to every 3.5 minutes.
Oh, OK. On parle d'un volume.
We're talking about a huge volume of documents that are being requested in that motion.
Aucune conscience.
Without any conscience. They want less years. You want to go ahead with that? Less communication? What communications? Direct communications? We never prevented the provision based on the needs of a committee for a specific discussion between a minister or a department or anything. But now to ask all documents and communications between the department in connection with, and I'll tell you a little bit what that would concern. This is, once again, the role of the opposition, the Conservatives, Chair. It's a little bit to block the administration of the government. It's a little bit blocking the government in order to prevent the government from getting things done right. But for the Bloc to get on board with that in a coalition, once again, it goes beyond what I would imagine. There's a coalition playing that game. I asked Mr. Barcelou Duval if we couldn't quite simply drop that so that we can get to work with our analysts to find solutions quickly to bring to an end this study within the committee so that we can come through with a report, so that we can find good solutions and good recommendations in the report. We all look forward to that. And you know what? The faster we move forward, perhaps we'll be able to save lives. Perhaps we'll prevent another accident. Perhaps we'll prevent a family from bereavement. But to ask for a massive volume of documents that is complex and complexify the research, it becomes a major burden in the machine. For that, it will require communications, whether just through all emails, text messages, communications that we have, briefing notes, professional texts, and messages. We have means of communication. Today, there are all kinds of messages through Teams, through Zoom, by wire, name them. There are plenty of tools. We use all possible tools within the communications. And we also have all the temporary documents, drafts, and discussion between departments, which represents tens of thousands of items connected with communications. Chair, this is something which it's huge. We can't put a price on that. We can't ask the department how much it will cost to do that. This administrative cost would come mainly from the sorting. We would have to sort through all that and not make everything public because there is legal verification to be done. It requires the legal department to act. It also requires protection of private information or sensitive information, because protecting sensitive information in there, we don't want to cause trouble for anyone either. Without mentioning the mobilization of hundreds and hundreds of hours, Chair, on the part of public servants. This is something which the Conservatives like to see, to mobilize the government. This is something which that's their marching orders. So Mr. Xavier Bassoli-Duval picking up with the Conservatives and going along with it to no longer having a functional government based on that motion being presented before the Transport Committee, that surprises me. On average, a request such as this, we can talk about several departments. We can talk about human resources services that have to get busy in order to free up employees, to free up a certain number of employees to deal with those documents. And the timelines are incalculable. It could go quickly, 8, 12, 14, 20 weeks. We don't know. We don't know how much time it might take, but it's clearly not less than 8 to 12 weeks for the research, drafting, information, verification, verifying the compliance, and redacting. And during that time, the employees of the public service cannot serve our citizens. On the one hand, they're saying with the left hand that they want to get through this, and at the same time, they say that they want to use all those public servants that are not advancing the issues in all the programs that we have in place in service of the citizens, while we mobilize them to search for documents just to waste time, just to be right. Because now the Bloc Québécois and the Conservatives are in a majority situation. Wow, we can do anything with the public service. It's immoral. The risk, too, of exposing personal information that may be very sensitive. They say they want to help families. They say that that we're insensitive to families, but to expose information that is confidential, we want lists. We want to make them public. We want the names to appear. That's protecting families. That's protecting the companies that are honest. Is that protecting drivers that have nothing to do with Chauffeur Inc.? It sounds like in that study, it's just negation. It's just everybody except the Quebecers. Well, bad news for you, Chair. There are some drivers that are purely Quebecois, Canadian, French, that had an education, who are drivers and who drive badly. It's not only immigration. And for that, well, Mr. Bassoli Duval, what he wants is to put out clips so that they can put everyone through the grinder and make everyone look bad in that. Whether you're the bad ones and you appear bad or
Mr. Lausanne brings
Je
up
comprends le risque
Monsieur
d'exposer.
Lauzon, don't
so we're taking the risk of one moment, please.
speak.
We
I think he actually has done a good job of bringing it back. He just once again referenced
just trying to
the
be
motion
helpful.
and everything else. But out of respect for each other, let's try and keep decorum. It's obviously a very touchy issue. We're talking about survivors. We're talking about doing right by them. Let's try and keep decorum in the room. Monsieur Lauzon, vous pouvez continuer.
Mr. Lauzon?
how long do we have resources for?
It's a great question. Okay. We currently have resources till 5:30. The clerk's going to be looking into additional resources. And if not, we'll suspend.
To midnight?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair.
Merci. On parlait des risques.
Thank you. We were talking about the risks of exposing the information when we want to protect an individual. I don't think the right way to do it is to use them to do political advertising and to collect funds. I don't think that's the right way. Soon the population listening to this and who are watching, they can go directly, as I speak, onto the Bloc Québécois website, click on news, go to the news of Xavier Bassoli Duval, and the first pop-up that appears on the article when it says that the Liberals are not nice because they don't want to see the witnesses who are victims, which is false. First of all, that's untrue. As I state, it's a falsehood. If you look under the pop-up, then it says you can donate $10, $20, $50 to the party to support this process. Isn't that lovely? It's very, cutesy to see that. And the best way to protect them, the people, that is, the citizens, vulnerable people, it's to get through with this study and to come out with solutions and to mobilize the entire public service, looking for documents, checking the documents, check with the legal service. It's inconceivable that we would be helping the citizens by doing that. The faster we get through to the end of this exercise, possibly those who are listening have already gone through the exercise of going to the Bloc Québécois website and have seen that the article is tied into the financing. Let me tell you one thing. The goal of the committee, primary goal, is to serve citizens, to serve the cause, and today's cause is Drivers Inc. And for that purpose, there is a snowball effect. This snowball effect, it's an expression in French, which means that
OK? C'est que quand on fait cette.
so when you make that request, Chair, of the Department or the Minister of Transport, then it brings in interaction with all the other departments, right? It can deal with public security. It can deal with, of course, human resources. Human resources have to mobilize employees and so on. Every time a department is mentioned in that way, then it's a mad rush inside various departments to find out who has to come in and respond between the departments. There are parallels. It can go. I did a quick search and I said, maybe if you turn toward this, would it affect the EDSC? And then we have CRA. We talked about with this T4, whatever. That brings it up to 7 departments. 7 departments affected. to be mobilized. They're happy with that, aren't they? It's the impact that it has. Imagine if you verify the duplication within the departments that have to take a look to pull all that together. It's an amount of logistics. As a government, we cannot let that happen. It's not just infeasible. It's to the point where some items are, it's not even legal. There's information that we cannot provide. And without discussing the inconsistency in each of the departments who have to contact one another and work out a solution to figure out what they're going to present. The work overload of interdepartmental work is incredible, Chair. I would have liked to evaluate that today. I would like to put some numbers on it, some prices, some costs. It's beyond assessment. You cannot put a cost on the operation of the governmental machine, each department of receiving that recommendation. It would be devastating for as to the well-being and management of our government. It would have a direct impact on the provision of services. The best way we can help our citizens is to give them citizen services. It's the provision of those services that must not cease. We have to keep on serving our citizens the right way, and we have to continue in the framework of Drivers Inc. We have to keep on evaluating license requests, international, everything that's under our jurisdiction, and interprovincial, and evaluate also verify all the compliance files, because compliance files also have to be evaluated by our government. There are certain obligations we have as a government at the Department of Transport, and our minister said this to us when he came in, Chair, that it's a file that involves the minister indeed, and he's on the lookout for this, but the Department of Transport is everything. You know, we have studies waiting. We receive letters for a study on ports, which is imminent. It's very important. We have to look into it quickly. Why? Well, it's happening now. We also have issues. We've heard about the finance minister talking to us about, sure, there are going to be the results of the budget. As a result of the budget, very important issues to discuss at this committee. And once again, we're waiting for very important files to come down. So we cannot talk out of both sides of our mouth and say, on the one hand, that we want to get through to our ends and listen to these lovely speeches. And I'm shocked there was no committee last week, and our citizens are paying for that. And the Liberals, well, they don't want to receive witnesses. Well, start by telling the truth. Start by saying things the way they are. And then we can get through this study. To say, first off, start out with this committee today by starting out with a lie, starting out with playing around with procedure and going along with the game. That's not the kind of politics that I want to do. Starting out by apologizing to the families and saying what the Liberals told us actually is that they wanted to meet with you in private. That's telling the truth to the families. But to tell them that Liberals didn't want to meet with them, that's false. The important thing is the impact of the services that we provide. When we keep on providing services to our citizens, then we must not halt the machine. That's what my message amounts to. Not to halt the machine, to properly serve them by using it for other purposes. If we use everyone for redaction and looking for documents, there could be other accidents or anything could happen. But that's not what we want, to have another Drivers Inc. accident occur. Well, the committee is meeting because things are delayed. We want to bring solutions. We cannot set everything up overnight, but at least if we can come out with some recommendations with our analysts. I'm convinced that our analysts are ready to receive what, based on what we have now, except that we agreed to 2 other meetings. Oh, all of a sudden, it's no longer 2 meetings. Maybe it's 3. Oh, well, I want as many as I can get, as long as there are witnesses. Witnesses, we can find you a list. We can find as many as you want. I gave examples of the types of witnesses we could bring in. But the witnesses who are there, we accepted them. All we asked was to respect the original motion. More were added, more were added. It was never enough. And even if we said yes to the original motion, you're still going to add more. If we go back to the basics and we hold 2 meetings with the witnesses on the list, including the families that were victims of a Driver Inc. accident, then we can get through and move on to recommendations. That's all we're asking for. It's important for people to be aware of this. It's important for the public to be aware of this. It's important for my colleagues across the way. And I repeat this. The families will come, but let them come in camera and meet with us with some dignity and respect.
Commencez ça aujourd'hui.
Starting things off today, letting that go, creating a serious precedent, a dangerous precedent for this committee, but for other committees too. Can you imagine the same government machine receiving a motion such as this in another committee? And I'm speaking to you as a representative of the government. And then within the machine, we would have to answer emails and discussions and briefing notes everywhere across the government machine with a second committee. After a second one, there'd be a third one and a fourth one and so on. So no, we cannot allow that to go through. No, we cannot let that go through. To receive documents that, for the most part, are redacted to say, oh, well, you're hiding things because you're hiding the integrity of the documents, which save witnesses, that protect people who could be vulnerable publicly in certain cases from revealing some information. It could be dangerous for their safety. So that doesn't matter. Somebody who lost a life in an accident, that's serious. We all said that. But losing your life or losing your integrity publicly by the revealing of documents, oh, it doesn't matter. To us, it does matter. Integrity of a citizen, for us, it means complete integrity. And to want to put to the forefront compromising documents that could put certain people at risk, it just is not appropriate. The inconsistency with the current emergency in this file, it's accumulating. It's building up because, as we said, we want to get through with it. But at the same time, they want to ask for the impossible. Why? To avoid getting through with it. All you have to do is say yes today. All we have to say is, okay, we move a motion or an amendment that will bring us back to the solution of saying, we'll have 2 meetings, we'll have the witness list, because the first meeting I had actually with Mr. Bartholomew Duval was that we had forgotten one aspect. And I said, yeah, me too. I think we forgot some aspects because there's always the medical side that we didn't discuss where there are drivers at risk. I talked to my family doctor and I had a good discussion with her. Being diabetic, I said to my doctor, I have a concern about driving with perhaps people who are not fit to drive. And she said, hold on there a minute. My doctor said to me, I have a lot of patients who are truck drivers, and when they're treated properly, when they have a good monitoring and good working conditions with the hours they're supposed to work, they can do their work very well without, you know, it will never be a restriction if the medical side is covered well. But my doctor satisfied me. I didn't discuss it again with Mr. Bartholomew Duval, saying that I would like to. And Mr. Bartholomew Duval told me in his list of witnesses, he said, that's not a bad idea. We can add her in. But where? We're starting to overflow into beyond 2 meetings. But then he even said, I could take one out. We're prepared to remove one in order to put in someone who's going to come and talk to us about either Diabetes Canada, or talk about the situation of drivers. And my doctor, Chair, persuaded me that maybe it's not necessary. There are diabetics who are entitled to live in their own way if they're treated properly. And that's an example. It could be high blood pressure or any other occupational disease. I just gave an example because I'm a bit more aware of diabetes, but this remains connected with the discussions to come back to 2 meetings. Coming back to 2 meetings with a list of witnesses. I dropped some witnesses, but in the first discussion we had with Mr. Xavier Bartholomew, we forgot about the towing companies. We said, okay, maybe the towing companies.
They felt
So when the accident occurred, there was no jurisdiction, either provincial or federal, or most of the time there's Quebec Police, the SQ, or the provincial police, depending which police service is involved. Well, we'll receive them, but personally, I don't see what the relevance is of bringing in a list of towing companies in this field. I don't think it's going to give us more information. I don't think the analysts are going to make any recommendations that the towing has to be done better in situations of driver's inc. I don't think that the towing will have an impact based on all the witnesses I've heard and all the aspects I've heard. But I respected Mr. Bartholomew Duval, and I said, okay, let's hear from the witnesses from the towing family, and then all of a sudden in the list there's one towing company, and then the rest, well, then they spread out and add and go somewhere else. And now, as we add more and more and more, it involves documents, and I think that today we're going to stop accusing the Liberals of trying to block this study. And what we want actually is to arrive at our ends. Too broad a motion such as that, and they know it very well. They're very well aware of the political games. There are experienced MPs at the table. They know exactly what I'm talking about. A motion that is too broad can quickly violate the sense of the study that we have now, because okay, they're just going to look for problems. Drivers Inc. They want to look for issues, and maybe they're going to embarrass the department here, public servant there, a deputy minister, a minister. We don't know.
But we hope we can find we can find someone, a scapegoat, to to gain some political capital, to put this on our Facebook pages or Twitter pages, to put this on the Bloc Québécois website, and then a campaign for funding right below it. And this is what I found. So give me money for it. And we are serving families, and these are the wicked liberals who are here. And at the same time, we need you to donate. That's not what we're looking for as a committee. We want better. We want that parliamentary practice
de régler
should be followed with the intent of resolving the issue at hand on this file. We want to understand this file. We want to have details from the witnesses. We want to fact check this non-compliance. We want to also check everything that's happening in the trucking industry. In what way can a towing company, what's the business of a towing company in this file? No idea. Maybe we'll find out more when they appear. So I'll prepare a number of questions for them. Maybe a question that I'll ask the towing companies is, can you determine what the reason is when there's an accident with a vehicle that you're supposed to tow away? I mean, they can speculate as much as they want. That's not their job, right? There's nothing more they can do or tell us. I mean, think about this logically speaking. But we'll go ahead, right? We'll go ahead with this. We'll say yes. Why? Because we want more witnesses appearing. I mean, it's not properly targeted. It's not serious enough. It's not well targeted. It's not well oriented, and it falls short of the guidelines that would allow us to meet our end goal. And the family is part of this. Why not meet them privately in camera and better listen to them? Take the time to listen to them. Listen to them grieve. Listen to the pain that they're experiencing, and then subsequent to that, and we'll do that. But unfortunately, we cannot take, because it's an in camera, you cannot take short clips from that and publish it on or post it on Facebook in order to get donations, because it's going to be an in camera session, right? But if you sincerely want them to appear, well, let them appear in camera. Let them appear before us. Let them come here and talk about this difficult experience in the most dignifying manner that a committee can admit people who've lost close ones in their family circle. But please, I beg of you, there's nothing worse than telling these families false truths by telling them lies, feeding them lies, and telling these families, looking them straight in the eye and telling them that the wicked liberals do not want to welcome you or hear you in committee. Point of order, Mr. Chair. I would like to know if there's a form of procedure to ensure that people sitting around a table do not accuse people of telling lies, or that when they're telling lies, there should be a way we can for them to be able to prove their allegations, because right now allegations are just flying here and there without any basis, and there's absolutely no way of responding to this, and I feel like my integrity is under attack here. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Barcelou Duval. We have Mr. Elvis, Mr. Ketheaway, and subsequent to that, you'll have an opportunity to address what Mr. Lozon is mentioning.
Whether it be in the House or even at committee, I would say would fall under your scope, and I would just ask you to call any member to be utilize decorum, because we are all honorable members here. We do make mistakes from time to time. Perhaps Mr. Lozon has made a mistake, and he might want to mention that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Albus. Just a reminder to all members to be judicious with the wording that we use in this room. With that, I'll turn the floor back over to Mr. Lozon. Mr. Lozon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Je vais citer un paragraphe.
I will quote a paragraph. Of about 10 centimeters, requesting a donation for Quebec, 5, 10, 15, 25. So during this moment, the Transportation Committee is paralyzed by Liberals who refuse to hand over the documents requested and to hear the witness accounts of victims.
Am I the liar? Si je continue, Monsieur.
It's written on the website, and let me continue, Mr. Chair. This committee, which was supposed to be a space for listening and finding solutions, is completely paralyzed by the Liberals, who go as far as refusing to summon the committee.
Je vais retourner
I'll go back to the serious task at hand. And when I mentioned that government is collaborating, but within reasonable limits, the department sent all the information that was required. And I think that our clerk worked really hard in order to address the concerns of all the witnesses that appeared since the beginning. We've received witness accounts, we've received reports, we heard analysis, we received statistics as well. We also received a detailed plan as well as a framework. And I think we're ready with our analysts to get to work. And I've already put the question to our analysts, and they couldn't wait to start drafting the report. And I mean, I didn't ask for a response, but I discussed with the analysts, and we heard back from we. So I think there was a major stride that was acknowledged by Mr. Barcelou Duval from TKA. And I think that government has never been close to addressing the needs, all the needs that were expressed, Mr. Chair. What we're saying is that we work in a targeted manner and not by emptying the services within all our government departments by forcing government to grind to a halt or paralyzing it. And yes, in the spirit of transparency, but no to overloading the administration because this delays action and this is costly for the taxpayer and detracts the public service from its essential work as far as securing our roads is concerned. Now imagine delaying the entire team that is required to draft this report at the detriment of road safety. And I think that very quickly we would all realize that it would be irresponsible of us as a committee and as a government to allow such a thing. Then I'll briefly address the manner in which the bloc has responded to the so-called 10 requests from the bloc, because when Mr. Barcelou Dibal will take the floor, he'll probably come back to that. And of course, there was a press conference. This press conference stated 10 reasons or 10 issues and said that we had to address those 10 structural issues in good faith with the bloc. And this, therefore, forces us to disclose to all the businesses everything that has to do with Drivers Inc. And there are a number of legitimate requests in there, but not necessarily for our government. Legitimate. And we addressed Ticket R, and we were there. And most of these, or some of these 10 requests would require the federal to act out of its jurisdiction and to step into provincial jurisdiction. And I'm not sure that my colleague from the bloc agrees with this. These are major defenders of the interest of Quebec. For them to now say that, for them who claim to be defenders of Quebec's interests and who very much espouse that we should remain within our lanes, I'm not certain that among the 10 recommendations that we have online, that asking the federal government to step out of his lane and meddle into Quebec's business would be in tune with his political party's mandate. And when you talk about road control, safety controls, and everything that falls under the purview of the police, of vehicle registrations, training, and the issuance of driver's licenses, administrative penalties, tickets, vehicle roadworthiness certificates and inspections. I mean, the list is endless and I can carry on. But if we now start recommending from a responsible MP to look at each line of these recommendations, you realize that most of them, a good number of them, actually step into provincial jurisdiction. And I think maybe it's interesting to look at the legality of these recommendations. We often say that you cannot govern within the areas of competence of the provinces. However, we don't want to, at the federal government, to substitute ourselves to the road inspectors of the SAAQ. This is provincial jurisdiction. Some proposals and some of the recommendations among the 10 could possibly be contested before the courts. I can say that for a fact. The bloc can say whatever it wants. We can put in place, we can try to put in place any of the recommendations, but never would they hope to be in power and manage the Canadian governments. But now it is our role as conservatives and liberals to not just allow anything that anything without substance that comes from the bloc. Government has to act with evidence. Government has to act on the basis of administrative procedures and processes. Government also has to act pursuant to fundamental rights, and also government has to we have to work with a serious government, and a serious government cannot work simply by publishing blacklists that affect people without an appeal mechanism, without rigorous criteria in place. To simply put up a blacklist simply because we want to publicly denounce delinquents, you might be mistaken. It is easy to be mistaken and to end up actually including other companies acting in good faith. We might end up endangering certain families, but that is not too bad. It's not. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe we should go ahead with it. Already, I can say that this is not the best way to help business and enterprise, especially the trucking business, because the industry that we already have, with the litany of problems that we already have, and if we add to that administration and take into consideration the labor shortages and take into consideration the current transition period post-pandemic. You remember everything that we experienced with customs, with vaccines, and challenges with interprovincial activities, and on an international scale. This company is experiencing increased costs, especially fuel prices. Now, if the bloc was to impose all of these restrictions, it is certain that we would have to address further compliance criteria. That's not our role. And this is not the time, Mr. Chair. This is not the time to over penalize or criminalize players in the field by multiplying, unnecessary punitive measures. What we're trying to do is to target is to privilege targeted measures. We want to make serious recommendations without compromising the businesses of companies that respect the rules. Because yes, we had several witnesses that appeared here to show us that they were still serious and that they were hanging on and doing their best to properly manage their businesses with training, with health and safety, occupational health and safety in mind. And we adding to this today so that we have the best of both worlds. Because some companies that appeared here, they were here to defend their employees. They were here to respect their book orders, to respect working hours. They were ready to collaborate with CENSST in Quebec, which is the equivalent of Occupational Health and Safety Boards. And yes, there are a number of challenges that we're keeping an eye on, and we're trying to see what can be done. certain requests from the bloc would be simply impossible to enforce.
On parle de ressources entre
We're talking about resources
DSC.
between ARC and ESDC. So there are a number of things that we can implement, others that are more difficult. Let's start with our initial recommendation, which is to say that we've already put in place T4A, which is a good thing. And we should endeavor to resolve this file at our level as quickly as possible. And now, with the other resolutions, Mr. Barcelou, Duval, and the Conservatives will have ample opportunity to include those in the report and include all the recommendations that they so desire in order to push this file forward. And if Mr. Barcelou Duval wants to include in the recommendation some of the recommendations that are arguable in the statements that were put forward during the press conference, we can discuss. We can have a discussion at that point in time. We can have debate here. We will get there, and we will come up together with the analysts with proper recommendations in order to push this file forward. We all know that the conservative and bloc's approaches are mainly punitive. Nobody wishes for an accident. Nobody wants to lose their close ones. Everyone wants us to have safe roads. It's not just an issue of Quebec Inc. It's not just an issue of bad drivers. It's not just about immigration. We can all, achieve our aims and, deal with this issue once and for all. And this is without forgetting where we're coming from, because what's important to bear in mind is that in the list of witnesses that we received, Mr. Chair, we had data collection, we had data analysis that was conducted by a number of players and stakeholders.
Responsabilité
And we still have a certain responsibility with regard to this file, and we have to follow this through. And as far as our responsibilities go, and the detriment of going out of our lane and stepping on provincial territory, we can ask provincial governments, we can make a number of recommendations, and we have a framework on road safety. But it all comes down to provincial jurisdictions. And now, yes, the federal government is responsible. When you go from when you're talking about the borders, the provincial borders between Quebec and Ontario, between myself and MP Barcelou Duval, we have a lot of interests astride both provinces, and we have truckers crossing the interprovincial boundaries or internationally. And on the international scene, for instance, Canada, US corridor, that's federal competence.
provincial.
Or extra provincial competences. The labor norms in this sector are up to date. The licenses are up to date. And what we've heard from the witnesses is that there's a process in place in order to secure a license. But that there are a number of things that need to be quickly recommended in order to drive change. And it was mentioned that you can still obtain a license in 24 hours. But we need to address that issue quickly, that this is provincial jurisdiction. Can we then forward recommendations to provinces so that work on this can start? Can we send them a set of recommendations? And then time will come. And at some point, I even thought during our discussions during the last meeting, I even thought of recommending so that we can move on to something else and then stop all this, dilly-dallying, cat and mouse game, as that we send a few recommendations to our analysts so that we can, get to the end of this issue and, address the needs. So this will include in our brainstorming, and because we heard from witnesses, especially their hours of service, we have a number of recommendations in that regard. Because what we heard from witnesses I'm still a bit old school with a logbook and a pencil where you would write down your work hours. And, you know, for having passed my category 3 license, you would visually inspect your truck and make sure that all the mechanical aspects are in place. And today, I learned, thanks to that committee, that they had electronic logbooks, and that by changing a single letter in your surname or first name, you would find yourself registering yourself on two different logbooks where you can actually accumulate hours. So Stéphane L. Lauzon could drive 8 hours on a truck and actually use the other logbook where the name is Stéphane Lauzon without the L and continue working for another 8 hours, which then compromises the safety of everyone, puts everyone in harm's way. And that is something that drew my attention. And this is something that needs immediate attention. It needs us to have a national logbook, maybe an interprovincial logbook, and we need to come up with recommendations. And do you want recommendations? I think I have as many as you may want. And I'm not happy that we're not able to table those today so that we can be able to get through to the end of this. This also includes vacation, protections against firing, because we also heard here that some truckers or drivers are threatened to go from point A to point B to register with a company as a direct and the only employee of that employer, to be driving a truck that is not necessarily mechanically checked. Why? Because they need to be more competitive and save costs. My ears were burning just hearing this, Mr. Chair. And on those issues, I also have recommendations. The only thing we need to do is to forward them to the analyst and the registrar, so that they can do their job. And when we are accused of being of bad faith, of acting in bad faith, and that we want to slow down the government machinery, that we want to completely freeze government operations. In fact, this is most unacceptable, because we can at least work on the basic standards for federal employees in transportation. The least we can do immediately, that's something we can get onto, especially if it affects drivers within our jurisdictions. The rest, we can recommend as much as we want. We want to work with the provinces. We want to work with witnesses that appeared here. And we had really, really interesting presentations, even from vehicle inspectors, even from safety agents working on provincial highways, who appeared here to give testimony and explain what the challenge is, the communication issues and information transfer between provinces, territories, and the other countries. How can we get to a point where we find a more universal system that makes their work easier? The work of these agents, who are seeking nothing but the safety of everyone. Their job is not just to check the weight of the truck, because the weight of the truck is one thing, but it also protects our roads, but it doesn't protect lives, because they're carrying significant loads on those roads. And it is high time we stopped and we regulated this in a more universal manner through recommendations.
La limite légale des heures de conduite, les repos, les journaux de bord.
The legal limit for driving, resting, logbooks, we have to establish standards for Transport Canada. So I looked around at it last week. I had a bit of time. So then, like yourselves, you didn't stop working. I was convinced that you, like me, you were on the Transport Canada site and you went to see everything in our jurisdiction and as to how we can improve things. And already I started to work on certain recommendations. And I realized that any form of interprovincial or international routes results in the fact that there may be some improvement based on what we heard today, well, during all the meetings that we had. Those rules are essential to road safety at the national scale and international as well, because we're still talking about what's going on here. Our drivers leave the country, we lose track, then they come back in, and they're still on our territory. They're the same drivers, they're delivering merchandise, they serve the Canadian economy, they ensure the prosperity of our businesses. They are an essential service, essential to the survival, not to human survival only, but to the survival of each of the businesses in your respective electoral districts that use transportation, whether it's road, rail, or air transportation. But transportation is the least costly way, the most mobile way, the most effective way to feed our businesses, or supply our businesses and our well-being, and bring food to our plates, put food on the table. Now those rules are essential, that they should be brought in, taking into account road safety at the national scale. And for this purpose, well, we have brought in requirements in the field of electronic logbooks, these famous logbooks. I've learned some of the technical standards. I learned on the site as well. The approval of the devices that are certified for that. They cannot detect the fraud of a false name. That's what we heard. In fact, there were all sorts of tricks around that in order to feed into Drivers Inc. This is not something that was put together over the last 2 days. It took them years to figure all that out. There are these strategies and ways of doing things to sidestep the system, to reduce costs, to be more competitive, to have more, to harm competition, to have more presence in the market by sidestepping the rules. And our government has its place to find recommendations, and we can deal with that in the provincial jurisdiction through our recommendations, in the form of recommendations, to solve certain problems that we see occurring in the provinces and territories. But there's one file that was discussed a great deal that affects us and where we have some grip, which is the tax revenue. The point is, at the same time, we have income tax, which is not being properly declared. We also have contributions to employment insurance, and those same people that don't have a certain job for a certain period of time, they're going to come and ask us for employment insurance, but they didn't pay in at the full value. So sure, we have something to say about that. There are the contributions to the Canada Pension Plan. There is also the federal part, the RRQ, the Quebec Pension Plan. Myself and Mr. Brassel-Duval, and in the other provinces, there's a different system. We have the obligation for independent workers, also an obligation in terms of taxation to properly respond to all the legal requirements for businesses. Other problems there's no problem when a company is independent. There was one employer, Lauzon, it was Stéphane Lauzon, but I needed a client. The minute you end up with having one client with one employer, then it causes an issue, and that's where we can step in. We also have a responsibility of delivery, the famous T4A in the case of Drivers Inc., which we stepped in quickly to rectify. with all that, we keep an eye on everything that has to do with the tax system, everything that I mentioned regarding audits and verification, false workers, independent workers with one employer, or self-employed. All of those come under Revenue Canada jurisdiction. And I agree that we can issue recommendations about that so that we can move forward directly to deal with what is up to us to do as a federal government. We can also include in some of our recommendations the fact that we can investigate businesses, not necessarily in the public forum, not on a black list to be made public. We can investigate businesses that use incorporated workers who want to avoid costs. You have to be careful. You always have to be careful on the legal side. I'm convinced that there are some files that could end up in court. And I'm convinced that we can come some way, and I'm quite confident in our analysts who are going to work very hard on recommendations so that, according to our guidelines that we're going to provide to them, to verify the legal side of that position.
Réévaluer aussi
We also need to reevaluate the tax status so that everyone pays their fair share and have no tax haven. Each company has to pay its fair share by filling out their taxes correctly. For that, we absolutely need to follow each file. It has to be done by our government so that we can develop a strategy, not to make their name public, but to call them to order, whether it's a system of fines or regulations that already exist. Because the Canada Revenue Agency has all the tools they need in their regulations and requirements to step in when someone is at fault. People are accustomed to that. Nobody wants to receive a letter in the mail that from Canada Revenue Agency. It's rarely good news. It's because they're doing their job. They're doing their job so that they can step in and deal with those who are at fault that have sidestepped the system. In our recommendations, we can work on recommending mechanisms to improve the clout of Revenue Canada to step in. We can also request, well, how can we impose penalties for false declarations? And we heard about this from witnesses from fraudulent classifications. There are people who have class 1 that don't speak French or English. That's what we heard. I'm not the only one who heard that. I've heard that some people received their class license, class 1, in 24 hours. Some of them don't even know the rules of the road, and they risk driving on the wrong side of the road because they don't have knowledge of how to read the signage. Can you imagine if our airline pilots, tomorrow morning, if we were to learn that they can get a pilot's license in 24 hours and they don't speak French, they don't speak English, and they have a hard time reading the label on the buttons? Hey, that would be quite dramatic. And it is a drama. It's as dangerous on land as it is in the air. There's a piloting school whom I met with last week. And the flying school where I went last week, they clearly demonstrated to me the obligations of a driver, that is a pilot, that they have to have. We're talking about 1,500 hours of training in piloting, governed by the Government of Canada, by Transport Canada. a lot of emphasis was placed on training with simulators, training of a practical nature. Why would it not be the same for those driving on the road? To put importance on training, sure, we can make recommendations, but it's not our jurisdiction. For pilots, yes, but not for truck drivers. They are not, if they're not interprovincial or international. Can we provide recommendations to our governments, to our provinces and territories to advance the verification, the targeted inspections on the process, on everything that is of provincial jurisdiction? But the federal level can intervene to businesses that are all outside the province or extra provincial that are incorporated. So Canada Inc. is under the jurisdiction of Canada. So then we can step in where it comes to managing the operation of the companies to tell them that no, it is not possible to contravene the law. You cannot use Canada Inc. in this form to play around, to sidestep the rules to the detriment of our citizens and our Quebecers and Canadians. Transportation safety, in our case, in connection with the interprovincial, or not interprovincial, but rather the international level, excuse me, we put a lot of emphasis on trade corridors because we must especially not discourage companies that are, first of all, facing a shortage of labor and who can barely make ends meet because they're legal. They can barely keep good working conditions for their employees because they're honest. It's hard for them to pay for the adequate training because they're conscientious people who want to cover the cost of the legal training, the legitimate training. And they want to give the best conditions to their drivers so that they can be a company that they've always been. There are some companies that have come here that were handed down from family to family, from father to daughter, father to son, and then they're proud to be able to talk about the context of their family business that they want to maintain. But they were educated to stay on the straight path. But as a federal government, what we want to do, we want to hear that from all the companies, all the businesses, all of the Canada Incs. That are on our roads. But we especially do not want to break the supply chain. This supply chain that is very necessary to our population, to our constituents, and to our businesses.
Non seulement international.
We're managing not only international standards, but also we have agreements with other countries. We're still working with agreements with the USA and Mexico so that our drivers can work. Yes, there are old governments. Sure, the government is working very hard to find good ones elsewhere. The government is working hard to develop markets outside of the USA that'll require drivers. It will require drivers and people who are going to get involved and reliable companies that are going to provide a service not only that is safe and reliable, but also that is going to contribute to the Canadian supply chain. We're going through a period of transition of freight without referring to, Chair, to some of the classes where we've seen that certain classes can involve dangerous materials that require more training. From what I've heard during the testimony, I am worried. I am worried. All my life, I worked with transportation of gas. When you're a welder by profession and you've been working in that field for 25 years, you transport acetylene and oxygen tanks and argon and CO2, dangerous materials. They're certified to transport those types of gases. Now I'm worried. I'm worried about the transportation of dangerous materials. Can national rules be reestablished in our recommendation to include the fact that we can talk not only about transportation, but to establish rules on the operation, to establish rules on the cargo securement and how to properly transport all that merchandise in order to be able to arrive at safety on our roads. We're already lucky that the accident that occurred was not gasoline, or very harmful or dangerous products. You know what happened in Lac Mégantic. We don't want to see that on our roads. We don't want to be reminded of some of those bad things, but let me tell you one thing. We are at risk. When an accident occurs with dry material, maybe it's not as bad, but we have to get ready for what's obviously at risk. Can we include that in our recommendations? Sure. Just the labeling, which may be not sufficient in our transportation. Can we make recommendations to the government? When I went to the site during my free time last week, I happened to have some free time from Tuesday to Thursday last week. I went to do some research to find out during my working hours, there was a whole section on what's being transported. I was surprised to see the list. And I did the research, and nobody ever talked about that. We're still at risk because of this, because a driver who's driving, who might be at risk of having an accident, if an accident occurs, we talked with the witnesses with heavy loads. A heavy load is pitiless. It's like a ram entering into knocking down a cement wall. It's very dangerous, but a heavy load that is composed of dangerous materials is even more substantial in terms of a danger. We haven't talked about that, and we haven't brought any witnesses on that. But I would be prepared to move on to the recommendations without bringing in any witnesses on the transportation of dangerous materials in connection with Drivers Inc. Also, we did not talk about, or very little, about specialized training. We talked a lot about training for the driver's license, training by the businesses that is serious, that provides internal training. They had in-house training on operation on routes and so on. And we talked about driving courses for trucking, which, by the way, are not obligatory for Class 1 for the requirements. But if you succeed, in doing the exam, the practical exam with a truck with 2 axles to pass your Class 1, then this is something which is worrisome. Can we learn more about that?
D'être un peu plus proactif là-dedans.
Can we recommend that government be more proactive? And in Quebec, Quebec already is ahead because we already made a number of announcements in order to go ahead with a number of recommendations going through their own jurisdictions, provincial jurisdictions. But can we take the lead from Quebec in this case and even go further, take these recommendations and then combine them? And when the time comes to make recommendations, I want to come up with what Quebec has provided in the past weeks with SAAQ in order to secure driver's licenses for Category 1 licenses. They want to make this more stringent, more difficult, and less easy to obtain in order to ensure that road safety becomes a priority for everyone. We might as well work as a government in order to establish a national standard on road safety in relation to this. We could equally work on a national framework, and we can also decide to work on standards, road safety standards in our recommendations. But always in collaboration with the provinces, always in collaboration with the different boards, transportation boards across Canada. And in this case, we've talked at length with our witnesses on labor relations. And I was listening to my colleagues asking questions, and I was thinking, what can we do? What can we do to assist you? Still in connection with the federal government. And you'll see in the different statements that we received that sometimes we get mixed up. We get lost in provincial jurisdictions. And it is up to us. And I wouldn't blame the witnesses because they don't understand that. But if already at our level as MPs, we get lost in provincial and federal waters, and I mean, I don't expect someone who wasn't part of this study from the outset. It is not up to them to, sort all of this out, but rather up to us to see if we can clean this up and check everything that was said by these witnesses and allow our analysts to do the analysis and also set to the side some of the witnesses who would come and tell us, for instance, things that were not within our purview.
Remorquage va faire en sorte
If we bring a towing company, are they going to tell us more than we already know? I'm not certain. But well, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's just imagine that we'll have a towing company that will come and provide testimony. And that maybe there will be an aspect that we might have missed. And I hope that analysts would have gleaned something from these towing companies that we can include in this report, because I would not want us to have wasted our breath on all of this and that nothing comes out of inviting those witnesses to appear. But can we at least talk about what concerns us? Prevention and preventing that foreign temporary workers be exploited unduly. And there's several government departments that are involved. We've requested communications, and this time around, this touches different government departments. Not only are we talking about public safety, but we're referring to IRCC, who issue licenses or permits for those foreign temporary workers. We're requesting communications between the Global Affairs Canada and IRCC, who issues a temporary foreign worker permits, and check the veracity of all the licenses or permits that are issued. It's completely ridiculous if we have to go to such lengths just to come up with recommendations that we can submit to our analysts. In this Chauffeur Inc. file, whether we like it or not, Mr. Chair, there's not much to work on. Yes, we're doing some work, but we're going to be dealing mainly with driver's licenses. We're going to be dealing with employees who are authorized and certified. We're also going to be dealing with the transportation department when it comes to inspection trips. And also working with ESDC, and we will be talking to, or maybe, withdrawing the permits of workers who are found at fault, or employees at Canada Inc. who are at fault. And we've seen a number of irregularities and how far government can go in such situations. Unfortunately, for some of my colleagues, the whole set of recommendations that we can put in place, among them, we can recommend to the provinces and territories to do better. But for this to be possible, we need to maintain some level of credibility at this committee and to understand where we came from and where we're headed. Can we truly say that we would arrive at recommendations that speak to these issues? Now, the federal government assumes its responsibilities, and we mentioned it. We've never detracted from this responsibility, and we need to assume our responsibilities as a federal government, be it in terms of fiscal issues, be it interprovincial safety. We want to be present. We are perfectly conscious of this situation. We want to discuss federal labor standards. I'd be ready to also conduct audits to look at the T4A. I'm ready to review T4A and see how we can fine tune it, and also see whether we've enshrined the obligation to provide a T4A. And also, with regard to road crashes, we need to look at training. We need to look at licensing. We also need to look at issues of compensation, victims. This is provincial territory. Protection falls under the purview of Quebec in this case and other provinces involved. And my colleague, right opposite me, knows this perfectly. This is a smart gentleman who is usually full of integrity. So I'm surprised. This is surprising coming from Mr. Barcelou Duval to, adopt this position and conveniently ignore reality and to have to deal with this political spectacle. I just can't believe it. I really can't, because if I were to come back
Vous avez partagé sur votre...
to the news that you released on your website, and this time around, I think I'll try to weigh my words. I'll tread carefully, but I read the paragraph earlier, and I quoted word for word the content of that message. And I'd like to invite my colleagues sitting opposite to me to go and have a read of that paragraph. Unfortunately, you would probably need a translation because it's unilingual francophone. It's normal. It's the website of the Bloc Québécois, so you necessarily want to provide translation. But I'm probably going to go through the interpreters who are ensuring the interpretation service tonight. Or maybe I should have. I think I'll read it in French, and then the interpreters will do a good job of interpreting it. So, Ottawa is accused of, and I quote,
Hey, j'en ai-tu nommé des leviers, monsieur?
and did I mention a number of issues? Do we have a number of mechanisms that we can leverage? And our mechanisms start with our analysts who are only expecting one thing from us: recommendations. We have the power and the authority to respond as a committee and come up with recommendations as quickly as possible in order to address the full list of witnesses that we sent. That we do it in committee, and that we completely forget these ideas that we have of witnesses, that we go forward. And here it is mentioned that Ottawa has several mechanisms in its possession in order to do away with this laissez-faire attitude that allows a number of players to, to escape the law. And I mean, I couldn't agree more. And honestly, if you had written this on the website of the Liberal Party, I mean, I would have completely gone along with it. But I think that it's important. Government needs to understand that only a series of coordinated measures can actually ensure the safety of road users. Up until now, I can still say that it makes sense and that it's pertinent because the recommendations will come from our analysts, and I can't wait to see whether the only set of measures that we can put in place is to coordinate a series of recommendations. We need to send, it is important to send, and I quote, a clear message to companies at fault so that they put an end to this dangerous phenomenon. This is a statement from the Bloc Québécois spokesperson, and this is what we've all been saying from the outset. You simply took our words and rehashed them. That is what we all want. What we want is to be clear and to tell the companies at fault to put an end to these practices. And before today, had anyone heard me say that I didn't want us to reprimand the companies at fault? Had anyone heard me say that I didn't want them to pay their fair share of taxes? Did you hear me say that we agreed with an illegal aspect in all the witness accounts that we heard, in all the questions that we asked? The first intervention that I made, I said this was an excellent study, and I thanked Mr. Xavier Barcelou Duval for bringing forward the motion for this study from the bloc. And I would like again to congratulate him. And I think this deserves a round of applause. But then to completely sabotage this initiative at the end. And why do I say this? I say it because, and I quote, and meanwhile, the Committee on Transportation is completely paralyzed by the Liberals who do not want to hand over the documents requested. And this begs the explanation that I requested for documents because I assessed for about 20 minutes the document. And I think it's clear for everyone that this is the beginning of the end. And I'm surprised that Mr. Baslou Duval will play along with the coalition of the opposition. And even when they brought this forward, now imagine, it's important for people to know this, that the Conservatives shared their speaking time with the Bloc in order to bring forward this motion. This means that if we're not talking about a conniving coalition, I don't know what else it is, but what is said here, and I quote, and meanwhile, the Permanent Committee on Transport is paralyzed by the Liberals who do not want to hand over the documents requested and to hear testimony from the victims. I'm not allowed to say that this is false. Is that what you're suggesting? I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but the victims are entitled to know that the Liberals
envers les familles.
have a lot of empathy towards the families and sympathize with the situation that they've experienced. Losing a loved one is painful, especially under such circumstances. It's a bit worse. There's never a good way for one to lose a loved one. But to use these victims for political gain, I think I'm allowed to say that this is not fair to say this to these families. And 4 inches later, just 4 inches below, there's a request for donations for $10, $15, or $20. If you don't think this is immoral to denounce this, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but I think this is outright immoral. And I don't know that I need to be diplomatic or sugarcoat the situation. This committee, which was supposed to be a space, and in order to conclude this statement here, this committee, which was supposed to be a space for listening and support, is completely taken hostage by the Liberals, has been taken hostage completely by the Liberals. And this time around, no, it's not blocked by the Conservatives. It is only the Liberals that are accused here. And I think there's a missing portion here. And I think it's supposed to be the missing part here is supposed to be the coalition between the Bloc and the Conservatives. And this committee that was supposed to be a space for listening and empathy is completely compromised or held back by the Liberals. And this only benefits the companies or the businesses at fault. And this reveals an outright lack or absence of compassion towards the victims. It was not enough to say this further up. It was not enough to say this in an independent paragraph to say that the bad Liberals don't want to hear any testimony from the witnesses, but it is included in the last but one paragraph, and it is mentioned in this last but one paragraph that this is a flagrant lack of empathy. And I'm not allowed to say that it's a lie, and I'm not allowed to say that Liberals are under gratuitous attacks for political gain. And it is mentioned here that this is an outright lack of empathy towards the families. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, and I would like to reiterate this and mention it to the population that we absolutely sympathize with the families, and we truly want them to provide their testimony. And I said that I wanted them to appear, but in camera. And I maintain my stance that we want these families to be respected, that their dignity be maintained, and that we don't confuse politics and the situation. And what I'm asking, Mr. Chair, is that we should not blend political donations and the witness accounts of people who've lost loved ones. We should not confound both. And I have a hard time understanding that the head and everyone seems to be in agreement with this, because being the whip, as the whip of that party, Mr. Chair, I think this would be something that I would not be very happy with, because
Reste une famille endeuillée. Que ce soit la
a family that's in mourning remains a family that's in pain, that's in suffering. But to use this tragic situation, a situation such as this one, where there was a road crash, where families lost their loved ones, to put this on a website page with a pop-up, a funding or a donation pop-up, or and incitement for people to join the party, I think this is disgusting.
peut-être remédier à cette publication.
Maybe we need to review this publication, or maybe shift it to move it to some other place, but to put it on a page where right down below there's a request for donations. I think this doesn't sit well with me at all. And now I'm going to talk to you because I mentioned earlier that I wanted us to understand where we're coming from and where we're headed. And we had quite a lengthy list of witnesses. But to add the list of witnesses that we currently have to the current motion, when I heard Mr. Barcelou Duval, he talked about towing companies. I agreed. And then we ended up having a list of witnesses from the coalition of conservatives. And once more, we acted in good faith and accepted. We just went along with them in good faith. We only said, well, as a minority government, it was not because of a minority government. It had nothing to do with that. It was a matter of common sense. We understand the role that we have to play as a government. And we've explained this a couple of times, and my colleagues have done so as well. We've explained how important it is not to completely shut down or slow down the municipal apparatus. We also understand
Le problème avec ce qu'on a vécu.
The challenge with what we experienced regarding the witness lists that we came up with over time. But the question remains, now, if during the first meeting it was that much of a thing, if it was that important to get the family to appear, Mr. Chair or Mr. Clark, how many meetings have we held so far since the beginning? I think we've had, what, about a dozen meetings?
C'est la rencontre numéro 16,
16,
Monsieur
hein?
Lauzon. Oui.
So we're referring to, this is meeting number 16, Mr. Lauzon. So we're now at the 16th meeting, and we're still waiting. We're waiting for 5 meetings to happen before inviting a witness who, throughout the 15 meetings that we've held, which were of less importance, and suddenly, Mr. Chair, I might have a Mr. Chair, Mr. Lauzon, a moment, please. So I would just like to confirm with you and the clerk that this is the 16th committee meeting we're having today. But on this particular topic, we've held only 6 meetings. Thank you, Mr. Barcelou Duval. I think you would have had ample time to request the appearance of the witnesses, and out of the 6 meetings that we've had, and thank you for the clarification. I thought it was 15 or 10 or 15, but of these meetings, 6 were directly in connection with the topic. But why wait for the last meeting? Now, why not introduce that during the first 4 meetings? Bring up this idea.
All of a sudden it pops up and they say, oh, I've got a little window to make some political capital somewhere along the line. We're going to really hit where it hurts. Fine. Let's do that. Let's go ahead. But let's do it with dignity. Dignity for the families. Let's do it in a dignified way by meeting them alone, not with other witnesses. I even said we have to, my choice would be not to have them meet the other witnesses, not to meet with the trucking companies and to face a company that may be guilty or affected the family. Could we isolate them somewhere and meet with them alone? And Mr. Barcelou Duval said, yeah, well, maybe we would need another half meeting, maybe another meeting. aside in order not to affect the list of witnesses. I didn't react to that. Why not two? 2.5. Two for all the witnesses that you want on your list. And then to be flexible again for another half meeting in camera to receive the family and to make a commitment that we will not take any motions to put on our social media. Is that too much to ask for the dignity of the families? And now all the recommendations of the families that they want to provide are going to be important to include in our analyses so that we can improve the file. But can we do it with dignity? Can we do it in such a way that it's done properly? We're not asking more than that. But to come out and say that we don't want to receive them, that is false. And to repeat it twice, to drive it home,
C'est faux.
that's false.
C'est une...
This is a distortion, a major distortion in the discourse that we want to bring forward in this committee. It is truly
mettre en place.
an opportunity that they want to bring in to change the way the committee looks to avoid facing reality. Why reality? If it's been the same thing from the start, from the same thing, we wanted it to be settled. Since the very beginning, what we've wanted is to find solutions that belong to us and to go even further than that. I agree with you, Mr. Basudival, to go and play in the sandbox of Quebec. You agree. Well, you want us to play in the Quebec sandbox? Say it publicly. You want that done? Say it publicly. I have no problem with that. I'll help you. We'll give you some recommendations to the provinces and territories. We want to solve the problem. The only solution to do this is that we work together and quite simply come out with a basic motion that we have and add 2 meetings and leave aside the production of documents. One of my meetings, come out with that, give us that, and we'll say yes. I haven't spoken to my colleagues because, but I'm convinced, I'm looking at them. I'm convinced that if we come out with that, we'll be able to move on. Why? Because it will work. We want to talk about the ports. Good news for Quebec, by the way. Good news for our port. Between the two of us a little. That's at home for us. And I can tell you that we have a lot to do in the next study. I think we're going to be have plenty to say, you and I, and Mr. Basudival, the study on the ports. We have a great deal to contribute to improvements. These are record investments. We're talking about millions and millions of dollars of investment in labor. Can we move on to the next one? Because this motion here results in the fact that if we can conclude it, we'll be able to move on to deal with the ports. All we're asking is to move on, to pass that motion and leave aside the redaction of documents and engage in discussion for the next study on ports. In Quebec, you have that in each of your ridings. It's everywhere in Canada. It affects not necessarily in your specific ridings, but in some of the conservative ridings, you have that everywhere in Canada, Chair. It's a study that requires seriousness. Notwithstanding that study that we want to put forward, we also have to think about the discourse, the speech by the Minister of Finance, the speech given in the House of Commons saying, prepare for that in the committees. It's coming through.
Ils nous ont dit clairement, ils vont nous arriver.
They told us clearly that they're going to come out with recommendations on subjects for studies in the committees that fit into the Transportation Committee. What more could we ask for? No. We're not going to put that in the resolution. We're not going to put it in the original motion. But what we want, quite simply, is to be able to come out with necessarily talking about the two obligatory meetings. I haven't spoken to my colleagues about it, but I'm convinced that our colleague would like us to add maybe a half meeting of a committee. I don't mind. I was sure of that. Half a meeting to receive the bereaved family. I'm sure he agrees with us. And then for us to be able to, you know, before you conclude, Mr. Lozon, we have to make a change for the interpretation. So I want to suspend until the interpreters are ready to resume.
Can take their place. The meeting is suspended to the call of the chair. order. Je vous passe la parole, Monsieur Lauzon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci la traduction de...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for our interpreters to come and assist us. It's a thankless task when you don't have the text ahead of you and you have somebody speaking very quickly. During 1 hour and 45 minutes, it's not easy for our interpreters. I'd like to start out by congratulating them, which brings us to the file that we all feel very strongly about at this Transportation Committee. Chauffeurs Incorporés, incorporated drivers, they have called upon us, and I did mention the major points we had as part of this study, and it was basically road safety. We talked about tax and fiscal justice, protection of workers, and the fair competition between the various companies that must work to be profitable and provide adequate service to their employees, provide them with the safety skills, etc. And that's what we tackled in the first part. I also put lots of emphasis on what we experienced with what was disclosed publicly in regards to the family that is grieving the loss of the driver and a member of their family. So it is these truck drivers that are affected, male and female, and those are essential services. But beyond that, we often talk about the truck drivers of companies. We talk about all those who are part of that industry, those who do the maintenance, the traffic controller, those who do the repairs, the maintenance, and the dispatchers who have some incredible work to perform. We were talking earlier and comparing this to the aviation world, and these are not air traffic controllers, but for having seen what they do up close, they have tremendous work to do when it comes to safety, on which vehicle needs to be maintained, where we are at in terms of licenses and permits, where we are we at in terms of the roads, and taking one itinerary versus another can play on security and safety. There are many risks involved. And we've been talking about them since the beginning of the study. What's important for us is what's good for Minou is good for Pitou. What's good for one is good for the other. All the rules of the game must be equal to everyone, but it has to be done appropriately. The same rules should apply so that Chauffeur Inc. can work, so that it is done in a standardized way across Canada, and that we as a government can issue recommendations as quickly as possible.
Parce qu'on sait que...
That we all agree on, because we know that that practice, be it by illegal drivers, foreign workers, temporary foreign workers, or freelance workers, we have to put some order in this. Some of them are working under pressure from their employers, and this is what we heard the witnesses tell us. This practice has very serious consequences. And these consequences, how can we solve the problem? Well, if we can make recommendations quickly by working with analysts and the clerk, we can do something and then move on to something else. Of course, there are many limitations, payroll taxes, a lot of things are impacted. We have to intervene on this. We have the loss of tax revenues. The government is losing money on the tax side, so we have to be able to go and get our share in order to compensate this loss. There's also the erosion of loyal competition. What we heard concerning businesses who decided to play by the rules, Mr. Chair, these businesses work hard. They are listening to us today, and they are telling us, can we arrive at these ends through this committee? I'm convinced that the witnesses our committee heard in that study want one thing. They want us to be able to make recommendations taking into account the solutions they suggested. Can we solve all problems? No. Can we quickly make some changes? I do believe we can. I believe we can make recommendations to provinces and territories in order to improve things. We felt that there are some workers who are vulnerable to injury, to inadequate driving because of businesses who are exerting a certain pressure, and that's a problem because we can easily recommend working with the provinces in order to find the beginnings of solutions in order for those workers to have work that is that respectful of their skills and that takes into account a chain of supply that we very much need. In the research that I've conducted, maybe 25% of drivers have improvements to make. They are paid according to different models, and in some regions in Quebec and in Ontario, it's mainly a concern. There are issues elsewhere in the country, but in Quebec and Ontario, it's a way of doing things that has developed faster with stratagems that we've heard about concerning obtaining a license, and especially there's the issue of loyal competition. Businesses who play by the rules, they pay their fair share, and they're proud to do it because they are part of a society and a state where there are rights and there are rules which they follow. But this comes with responsibilities. But some businesses, as we've heard, can reduce their costs considerably, and it can mean 30% or 40% by cutting corners short. And if we want to maintain fairness and loyal competition, all the businesses who are not following the rules, there must be a mechanism for finding them and identifying them, making decisions without having to do the work in the place of the provinces. The provinces have an important role. I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to, in our recommendations, that we can name Quebec as an example for the first steps that have been taken in the transition on limitations in the case of licenses that are too easy to obtain, just by respecting the rules that are in place. That is a good first step. So the rules for obtaining a driving license in our province, in Quebec, we have learning French, a license can be obtained either in English or in French, but there's an access to interpretation so that things can be done according to the rules. And it's important for us to remember the protecting workers. We talk about risks on the roads, but there's the protection of workers in relation to public security, because the workers we've heard told us that they were afraid of driving. They're not afraid because of what they're doing, because they're following the rules. They're afraid because of others. When you're in a great big truck and you're afraid of your colleagues driving other trucks, well, we should all be concerned. So the question of the protection of workers is important for us as a committee, and we can make recommendations to show these workers, these drivers, that it's important. Many of these businesses can't find enough workers because drivers are leaving the sector because they want to do something else. And one of the reasons for them wanting to do something else is that they don't feel comfortable within that model. The model is broken. We have to do something as quickly as possible. And the best way to break that cycle of inadequate driving of Chauffeurs Inc. is to make recommendations at the committee, is to accept to hear witnesses for 2 other meetings, and maybe have another half meeting. We completely agree with this, to go to have half a meeting with the family of the deceased, and we can show some empathy for the family and see if perhaps we can find solutions. And we also have to take away all the documents that demand a lot of work from all of the government administration and that make no sense. There is one way we can do it, is that we make a recommendation to that effect and go ahead. Next week or this weekend, I would like to meet the grieving family and explain them the real position of the Liberals, to explain to them the work that we've been doing. But I would never use private conversations perhaps I'll have with them, if I have one. Never would I use that conversation in my social media or in some kind of public publication when we're talking about someone who lost their life in the Transport Inc. sector. And then there's that economic pressure that the businesses felt. Some drivers, beyond the comments of illegal drivers, they feel a pressure they didn't feel before the pandemic. I know that it's easy to blame the pandemic for everything, but there were some consequences, costs that increased, destabilization of employees, of the workforce. There were great changes in skilled professions, and one area where this has been felt was the area of transportation for different reasons. There was the vaccine mandate and a lot of things we've already talked about a lot, but it means that some drivers worked beyond the legal limits, but there's the difficulties that businesses have today with the explosion of costs, gas, maintenance, buying vehicles. This has changed a lot. Don't forget that for each delivery There has to be a breakout of expenses with salary, operation costs, costs of acquisitions. The businesses showed us that profits are decreasing over time and from one generation to another. Some generations were able to earn a living, and today they can't make ends meet. So they have pressure from illegal drivers, but they have a pressure from the operating costs that's a constant pressure. Can we at least, as a committee, help these businesses a bit? Can we support them through recommendations so that at least we can solve the part that is ours, that is to solve with recommendations in cooperation with the provinces the problem that we have with Drivers Inc. The more there are risks on our road, the more we are vulnerable. And, Mr. Chair, there are several factors. Not only do we have to live with the roads that are the state of the roads is deteriorating, and there's the issue of investments in infrastructure for the safety of users, but we also have on our roads more and more trucks with the increase in the population, more and more services for the population's needs, and we're not increasing infrastructure. So we have to do more for our infrastructure. We have to do more in order to maintain what we already have before investing massively in infrastructure. We have to start with maintaining what we already have. Now, let's talk about the operation costs of businesses, which means that these businesses have to wait for our committee to make recommendations that should be made as quickly as possible in order to solve at least the part that is in our mandate, that is to make operations fair between businesses. And we cannot do this alone. We can all do it together, all parties together. I agree that we can go a bit further in our recommendations in order to interfere a little in provincial recommendations, because our recommendations will remain recommendations of the committee. We've seen in other committee recommendations that to cooperate with provinces to find adequate solutions in areas of federal and provincial jurisdiction, and this is a good example because there are some elements that are of both federal and provincial jurisdiction. So the first federal responsibility is intergovernmental cooperation, and I think that we can have a lot of weight in this committee. We can be a committee that is essential in finding a solution. I've often said that it's a shared jurisdiction between the federal government and provinces. And I want to tell you that we must react very quickly, because there's a way fiscally of reinforcing fiscal rules through our committee. We also have the opportunity of cooperating with the provinces to harmonize all of this in order to have standards and inspection mechanisms. I had the opportunity to discuss at length with an employee of the Department of Transportation, and I can tell you that I learned a lot from the Quebec government, because they feel stuck in information that's limited to them. Can we make things possible? Can we make these communications easier? Can we have tools to have better cooperation between provinces in order to harmonize standards, in order to find inspection mechanisms? And I'd go even further, and maybe Mr. Barsalou-Duval will tell me, now you're talking, Mr. Lauzon, about provincial jurisdiction. I taught for 21 years, and I worked with the trucking school. I was in a metal work school, and training is important for me. Training is at the basis of knowledge for me, and I would not like for our new pipeline to be welded by welders who did not receive the right training. They need 1,800 hours in training, and they have exercises, and if they fail, they lose their job.
About the relevance of pipelines, but I was wondering, Mr. Graves has had some comments about pipelines. I wonder if he wanted to make some comments on that.
Thank you very much. I don't believe that's a point of order, Mr. Lawrence. But I will. It is a point of order, but is it in order? No. I will turn the floor back over to Mr.
Oh, it's a double break.
I got a double point of order to allow Mr.
Double
Lauzon
point.
to take
Thank
a drink.
you,
As
Mr.
he has
Albas.
12 minutes left. Yes, Mr. Albas.
As interesting as it would be to hear Mr. Greaves' thoughts on the pipeline to the Pacific Coast, I do want to reiterate, though, the point was a point of order on relevance. Unfortunately, Mr. Lauzon has strayed where he's not been coming back to the motion every 3.5 minutes like a pro. Unfortunately, he's getting a little slow, and I just really want him to get back on his A game.
Thank you very much, Mr.
This time I
Albas.
think it's Lamoureux.
I do think Mr. Lauzon had just spoken about the importance of proper training of drivers, and he was making the link to setters. But I will still remind all members to bring it back to the subject matter at hand. Mr. Lauzon, the floor is yours. You have 11 minutes left.
I will bring it back in a few minutes. Relevant is there. Quand je vous ai expliqué que la formation est extrêmement importante, on a dans différents...
When I explained that training was important, in different areas, there are very strict criteria. A welder who works on pipelines has an X-ray at every 3 different points, and if he loses control, he loses his job. 3 tickets for welder. It exists everywhere. It's a Canadian model. So if your X-ray shows that you failed, not only do you have to start again, but you lose one of these 3 warnings, and after 3, you lose your license. In Quebec, like elsewhere in Canada, we have a points system for licenses. We just have to make sure to apply the system. What truckers are asking, what we could put in our recommendations. Maybe Monsieur Barsalou-Duval said we're going too far in our recommendations, but I'm almost tempted to do it. But the main issue is to find solutions to be able to make recommendations. But I would like to tell the provinces to go and work on training, go and use what really hurts, use the points, use the ticket system. I told my daughter has her first driving license, her first car, her first winter driving. And the first thing I told her was, I told her it's a privilege to be allowed to drive. So you have to really study hard, pass exams, follow the rules. And then also there'll be bad weather you'll be confronted with. And also, I told her there will be imprudent drivers. on the roads, and you will also and she has to drive on Highway 50 every day, so there will be on that highway incompetent truck drivers. So I tell her that you cannot prevent a young person from driving because you live in a rural area, but I have to live with the consequence that my daughter will be driving on the same highway as trucks every day. So for that reason, if I'm not thinking about the grieving family, if I don't find the work of our committee important, then I'm not doing what I should do, because I don't want young people to be in this situation. And we're talking about youth with responsible parents who will have their death on their conscience, will say, I let them drive, get their license, and at 17-year-old, they were in an accident because of a driver inc. And that's the link with welders. Licenses for working on pipelines are very important for me. I taught for 21 years welders high pressure welding on pipelines, and I always told them the license you will have to work on a pipeline is a privilege. The driver who told us today, and all along these meetings during our study, they talked about things that were related to a privilege, because these drivers who made the efforts, got the right training, got experience, learned how to drive correctly, who work for responsible businesses, these drivers do not deserve the competition by drivers who could cause an accident, the unfair competition and the consequences of accidents. Where now, in relation to the larger goals of our government, we have to fight together against the Drivers Inc. model. And this means protecting fundamental rights of workers. We did not talk about the CNESST in Quebec and the equivalents in the other provinces, but it's a question of health and safety at work. We are at a time when we must think of health and safety. We must think of the mental health of drivers. We also have to think about families whose husband or partner has to go and drive for hours that go beyond the legal hours. And the drivers are held hostage, drivers who are men or women, but the members of their families are worrying, and we don't talk about this. We can solve this together. We can do something. We can make sure there is fair and loyal competition, and we can also indirectly improve the safety, road safety. And inspectors and government officials of provincial governments are asking for cooperation and for harmonization of rules and communication sharing, not making lists and making them public. What they want is what most people want. They want to see us all working together on this issue of the Driver Inc. model. You know, the Driver Inc. phenomenon is not a marginal one. And it's a real threat. And I rarely speak of my fears and my family, but every time I see my daughter Jade leave to go and drive on Highway 50, I'm always so worried, and this shouldn't be the case. I'm worried for different reasons. We can talk about the way this highway was built. They ran out of money at the Quebec government, so you have traffic on only 2 lanes across, and they've installed central objects, but everyday cars run over them. But it's very important for me for this problem to be solved. Millions of trucks are on our highways. I often talk about Highway 50, but you all have in your areas highways used by trucks. Trucks driving between ports through urban centers. Trucks have to access very limited spaces sometimes for delivery, so we need competent drivers, drivers who have been well trained. We need drivers who are fair in salaries between businesses, and it would be preferable, please, not to use these issues for partisan reasons, using the feelings of a grieving family. So today we have the opportunity to correct an important problem, because there is a problem. We know that there's not a lot of time left, but I want to say one thing before finishing. If we want to work together, if we want to solve the problem, I'm asking if possible to have a solution of 2.5 meetings, of which 2 with our current witness list and 1 for meeting the family, meeting them, we express our sympathies, and for all of us who want to have an opportunity to talk to them, to look them in the eyes and give them our sympathies and say that we're working on this issue. I'll never say, oh, it's because of the bloc, etc. It's not time for partisan politics. It's time to spend time with this family, but to do it in camera. It's important to deal with communications that do not have their space in the government system. We have to finish on this motion. We have to be serious in our work and start the study on ports, which would be very beneficial. We have the opportunity, all of us together, to have a win-win-win situation with the Port of Montreal, Contrecoeur, a project for some 100 million, thousands of jobs in your area, Mr. Barsalou-Duval. This is a project that would be sustainable, profitable for the good of communities, businesses in your area, Mr. Barsalou-Duval. It would be very profitable to go ahead on the study.
Discussion. Ça marche?
We will now suspend and pursue the discussion at the next meeting.